The laptop screen burns white at midnight, and I am already 3 paragraphs deep into a love story that isn't mine. My fingers stop mid-sentence, not because I lost the words, because the door just exploded open like someone kicked it off its hinges, and Knox walked in carrying enough energy to power a small city, his black hair still wet from the gym, tattoos crawling up his neck like living things, chains swinging against his chest, and the man didn't even look at me. He dropped his bag directly onto my keyboard. "Move your stuff," he said. I stared at my laptop, then at him, then back at my laptop. "That's my keyboard you just buried," I said. "Your keyboard is fine." He didn't even look guilty. He pulled off his hoodie and tossed it toward his bed, missed completely, and left it on the floor like that was always the plan. "You write too much anyway. Your eyes are going to fall out. Thank you for the medical advice. Anytime." That was Knox. All 6 feet 2 inches of him, loud as a car alarm, built like someone drew an alpha from memory and refused to erase any of the rough edges. And before I could move his bag off my keyboard, the door opened again, slowly this time, like the air itself was parting out of respect, and Frost walked in. The contrast was almost unfair. Knox filled a room by volume. Frost filled it by temperature. Silver hair, white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, suspenders, a thin collar chain at his throat, and eyes the color of winter concrete. He looked at Knox's hoodie on the floor. He looked at Knox. He didn't say a single word, but somehow the silence he produced was louder than anything Knox had just said. Knox looked at the hoodie. "I was going to pick it up." "You weren't," Frost said. His voice was low and even, like a flat line that somehow sounded elegant. "I literally just said I was. You said it after I looked at it." Frost stepped over the hoodie, set his bag down precisely at the foot of his bed, and sat. He opened a book. The conversation, as far as he was concerned, was finished. Knox opened his mouth, closed it, pointed at Frost with one finger. "You know what your problem is? You're going to tell me regardless," Frost said, turning a page. "Your problem is you think silence makes you interesting. And your problem," Frost said, without looking up, "is that you think volume makes you write." I sat between them with my hands folded on top of Knox's gym bag, watching this exchange like a man who just discovered fire. My writer brain didn't just activate, it detonated. I could feel the words assembling themselves in the back of my skull, whole paragraphs forming while these two breathed the same air and hated it. "Levi," Knox turned to me suddenly. "Tell him silence isn't a personality. Don't involve him," Frost said. "I'm already involved," I said cheerfully. "Emotionally, creatively, spiritually. I'm very involved." I lifted Knox's bag off my keyboard and set it on his bed. "Also, your bag was on my laptop." Knox didn't apologize. He just grinned, which somehow worked as an apology and an insult at the same time. "What are you even writing?" "A love story," I said. The word love landed in the room, and both of them went quiet for exactly 1 second, which, if you know Knox, is basically a standing ovation for silence. "For who?" Knox asked. "For my readers." I turned back to my screen. I write a serial BL romance. My readers update every week, and they will riot if I don't deliver. Frost's page-turning stopped, just for a moment. Then it resumed. I filed that away like a receipt. "BL," Knox repeated. He said it the way people say a word they understand perfectly, but are buying time with. "That's the thing where 2 men fall in love." "Yes," I said. "Usually one is loud and runs entirely on emotion." I didn't look at him. The other one is cold and thinks he's better than everyone. I also didn't look at Frost. And somehow, against all reasonable logic, they end up completely obsessed with each other. The silence that followed was the most interesting silence I had ever sat inside. Knox cleared his throat. "Right? Cool. Whatever you're into." Frost said nothing. He turned another page, but his jaw had done something, tightened just slightly at the hinge, and I caught it because I catch everything. That is my entire skill set. I notice the things people do when they think nobody is watching. I turned back to my screen and typed 1 line into my draft document. They don't know yet that I'm writing them. I saved the document, rolled my shoulders, and reached over to adjust my desk lamp. Before my hand got there, the light shifted, angle corrected, beam redirected away from my eyes. I looked up. Frost had leaned across from his bed and moved the lamp himself. He was already back behind his book by the time I processed what happened. He didn't offer an explanation, didn't ask if I wanted it, just saw what I needed and did it without a word. I stared at the side of his silver head for 3 full seconds. Then I opened a new tab, went to my story comments, and read the most recent one from my top reader, a person called Shipwatcher07, who had left this note under my last chapter. Author, I don't think your two alphas are in love with each other. I think they're both in love with the one watching them. Are you sure you're the writer in this story and not the plot? I laughed and typed back, I am never the plot. I closed the tab, pulled up my draft, and began chapter 2 of a love story I was absolutely certain I controlled, while behind me, Knox and Frost had gone completely silent, and the specific quality of that silence, the weight of it, the direction of it, pressed against the back of my neck like a second lamp, warmer than the first, and aimed entirely at me. Knox is standing in the middle of the room in nothing but a towel when I open my eyes the next morning, and my brain has the audacity to take a full 3 seconds to process that before sending any kind of alarm signal. "Where's my shirt?" he said, not to anyone specifically, just to the universe, running one hand through his damp black hair, while water dripped down his collarbone and traced the edges of every tattoo on his chest like it had a personal agenda. I sat up, looked at my laptop, looked back at Knox, looked at my laptop again. "It's too early for this," I said. "For what?" "For whatever this is." I gestured vaguely at his entire situation. "I'm looking for my shirt, Levi. This isn't a production. Could have fooled me." He turned around, scanning the room, and the tattoos on his back were somehow worse than the front because there were more of them, and they moved when his shoulders moved. And I was a writer. I noticed details. That was my entire job, and I was simply doing my job by noticing that Knox had a very detailed back, professionally, for research. Then Frost walked out of his side of the room fully dressed, white shirt, suspenders, every silver hair in place like the morning had personally ironed him, and without a word, without even looking at Knox, he reached down and picked up Knox's shirt from the chair beside my desk, where it had been sitting the whole time, and held it out. Knox turned around. Their hands met on the fabric. I had my notebook open before I even decided to reach for it. "It was on the chair," Frost said. "I checked the chair," Knox said. "You looked at the chair. There's a difference." Knox snatched the shirt and pulled it over his head, and for 1/2 second he was blind inside the fabric, and Frost's eyes moved, just slightly, just barely, and landed on me. That flat winter gaze that never asked permission for anything. I wrote 3 lines in my notebook without looking down at the page. "Thank you both," I said warmly. "That was incredibly useful." "For what?" Knox said, head emerging from his collar. "Character study." I capped my pen. "You two have an incredible push-pull dynamic. Very marketable." Knox stared at me. "You're studying us. Professionally. At 7 in the morning. Inspiration doesn't check the clock, Knox." He pointed at me with one finger, the way he always did when he didn't have a comeback ready, and then he grabbed his bag and left for his morning class, the door swinging shut behind him, with exactly the energy of a man who wanted the last word and didn't get it. Frost picked up his own bag, paused at the door. "What time is your first class?" he said, without turning around. 9, I said. "It's 7:14. He opened the door. "Don't forget to eat." And then he was gone too, quiet as a drop temperature, and I was alone in the dorm with my notebook and approximately 47 new ideas and one feeling in my chest that I was going to go ahead and label as creative excitement and absolutely nothing else. I had the plan running by noon. Simple. Clean. Surgical. I told Knox I needed help moving the mini fridge and asked Frost to hold the door. I timed it so they'd both be in the narrow hallway outside our dorm at the same time, while I was conveniently still inside as I locked them out. I needed them alone, proximate, and without an audience. Specifically without me as an audience, so the natural chemistry could breathe without my energy disrupting the scene. What I did not account for was Frost. I pressed my eye to the peephole, and Knox had Frost against the wall. Not gently. Knox's hand was twisted in Frost's collar, his voice low and fast, saying something I couldn't hear through the door. Frost wasn't fighting it. He was just standing there, with his back against the wall, looking up at Knox, with an expression so controlled it was almost frightening. And whatever Knox was saying, Frost was letting him say it, which meant either this was a deeply intimate moment of alpha tension that was going to fuel my next 4 chapters, or Frost's eyes moved. Slowly, deliberately, directly to the peephole, directly to my eye, and he smiled. Not a big smile, not warm, just the corner of his mouth, lifting exactly enough to communicate one complete sentence without opening his lips. "I know you're there." I jerked back from the door so fast I knocked my chair over and stood in the middle of the room with my hand pressed flat against my sternum because my heart was doing something completely unreasonable. He couldn't have seen me. The peephole only worked one way. That was the entire design of a peephole. That was physics. The door handle turned. I dove for my desk. Knox walked in first, reached past me without a word, and dropped something onto my keyboard. My spare key. The one I kept in my locked drawer. He didn't explain it. He just looked at me with that almost smile and said, "Next time you want to run an experiment, just ask." My mouth opened. "We don't bite," Knox said. Then he looked at Frost, who had come in behind him, silent as snowfall. Something passed between them. Knox's almost smile widened by exactly 1 degree. Usually, Frost sat on his bed, opened his book, and said nothing. I turned back to my screen and my hands were actually unsteady when I opened my draft document. I wrote the peephole scene in 11 minutes flat, posted it without rereading it, and watched the comments explode in real time until Shipwatcher 07's notification hit my screen like a stone through glass. Author: the one shaking in this scene is the narrator, not the 2 alphas. The alphas were completely calm. Why is the narrator shaking? Who exactly is coming undone in your own story? I closed the laptop. Knox's hand came down on my shoulder from behind. Warm, heavy, the kind of weight that had no business feeling that grounding. And he leaned down and read the closed laptop like he could see through it. "Go to sleep, Levi," he said quietly, right beside my ear. "You're overthinking a story that already knows where it's going." Frost reached across from his bed and clicked off the lamp. Darkness, complete and immediate. "Good night, Levi," Frost said from across the room, his voice low and even, and aimed with precision at exactly where I was sitting. "The story will find its ending." A pause that lasted just long enough to matter. It already has. I sat in the dark between them and did not move for a very long time. I wake up with a plan so clean and so perfectly constructed that I lie in bed for 3 full minutes just admiring it before I even sit up. Operation Ship It launches today. Knox walked out of the bathroom with no shirt, and I was beginning to think this was simply who he was as a person. A man unbothered by fabric. He moved straight to my side of the room, picked up my cereal box, poured himself a bowl using my bowl, and sat down at my desk, eating it, with the complete confidence of someone who had never once considered consequences. "That's my cereal," I said. "I know," he said. "And my bowl." "Yep." "Knox. Levi." He looked up at me, completely unrepentant, tattoos catching the morning light across his chest and shoulders, chains swinging forward as he leaned over the bowl like this was his desk, his cereal, his entire dorm. I reached past him for the box, and his arm shot out. Tattooed, unreasonably solid, hooked around my neck, and pulled me into a headlock with the casual ease of someone who did this to people regularly and enjoyed it every time. His knuckles dragged slowly across my red hair. "Knox!" My voice came out considerably less dignified than intended. "You're tense," he said. "For someone who writes romance for a living, you have extremely tense shoulders. Let go of my head. Say good morning first." "Good morning, Knox. Please let go of my head." He released me, grinning. I straightened up, smoothed my hair back, and reached past him to rescue what remained of my cereal. My cereal notes were on the desk beside the bowl. The corner of one page had gotten soggy from a splash of milk. I peeled it away from the desk and held it up. "You got milk on my outline," I said. "Your outline will survive," he said. This was chapter 9. Then chapter 9 is extra emotional now. He pushed back from the desk, still shirtless, stretched both arms above his head until his spine cracked, and dropped onto the couch like a man with nowhere to be and no apologies to make. I looked at him. looked at Frost, sitting precisely in his own area. Silver hair, white shirt, already deep in a textbook like the morning hadn't happened at all. I looked at the television, the plan crystallized. I pulled up the most emotionally charged film I had saved, specifically for this purpose. Pressed play, set the remote on the coffee table between them, picked up my bag, and stretched with what I hoped was convincing casualness. "I have to run to the library," I announced. "You two relax. Watch the movie." I was already moving toward the door. "Don't mind me." Neither of them said anything. I stepped into the hallway, eased the door shut behind me, pressed my back against the wall, and immediately called Danny. She picked up on the second ring. "Danny, I need you to listen carefully because I only have about 8 minutes before I have to go back in there." "8 minutes before you go back where?" she said. "The dorm. I left them alone with a romantic film. Ambient atmosphere, emotional soundtrack, shared proximity on a couch. Danny, the conditions are perfect." Silence. "Are you standing in a hallway right now?" she said. "That's not the point. The point is Knox has been getting more physical every single day. This morning he had me in a headlock over cereal, which in alpha behavioral language is redirected. Levi, he had you in a headlock. Over cereal? Yes. Which means the emotional tension is building, and he needs an outlet, and if I can get him and Frost in the right environment, the redirect will happen naturally between them instead of onto you," Danny said. "Exactly. Levi." Her voice went very flat. "I say this with complete love. You sound clinically insane. Shipwatcher 07 said the same thing, and she has been wrong about everything." "Has she?" "Every single thing," I said firmly. "I'll update you tonight. The evidence is mounting, and I need you on standby for when this breaks." I hung up, checked my timer, 6 minutes 40 seconds, and waited. The door opened. Frost stepped into the hallway with his bag over one shoulder and stopped when he found me standing there against the wall with my phone and my absolute conviction. He looked at me for one long, unhurried moment, the way he looked at everything, like he was reading something written in a language everyone else had forgotten. Then he reached out, put 2 fingers beneath my chin, and tilted my face up. I did not move. He pressed a single kiss to my cheekbone. Warm, deliberate, slow enough to be a full sentence in a language I didn't have the dictionary for yet. Then he dropped his hand, adjusted his bag strap, and walked toward the elevator without a single word of explanation. I stood in the hallway with my hand rising automatically to my face. Knox appeared in the doorway. He looked at me, looked at the elevator where Frost had just disappeared, looked back at me with an expression like a man who had just watched someone else pick up something that belonged to him. I spun around and grabbed his arm. "Knox," I said, "did you see that? Frost his walls are coming down." The physical affection, the unprompted contact, that is emotional breakthrough behavior. That is chapter 7 of every slow burn I have ever written, which means the two of you are right on the edge of, "Levi," Knox said. "The turning point, Knox, I'm telling you." "Levi," his voice dropped one full register. "Stop talking about me and Frost." I blinked. "Why?" He looked at me for a long moment with something sitting behind his eyes that I couldn't immediately name. Then he turned and went back inside without answering. I followed, filed the tension under unresolved alpha pride, and started planning dinner. Candles. Same side of the table. Shared plates. By 9 o'clock I had the small table set with 2 candles, 1 shared serving dish, and Knox and Frost sitting side by side, exactly where I needed them, while I sat across beaming like a producer, watching the first rehearsal of a show he already knew was going to win awards. "I read that shared meals build emotional intimacy," I said pleasantly, unfolding my napkin. "Something about the act of eating together, lowering psychological defenses." Knox and Frost looked at each other. I picked up my pen under the table. What happened next was not what I planned. Knox picked up his fork, loaded it with something from his plate, and held it out. Not toward Frost, toward me. Direct, unhurried, maintaining full eye contact with Frost the entire time, like the fork was a message written in a language only alphas understood. "Open your mouth," Knox said. "I have my own food," I said. "Open, Levi." I opened. I don't know why I opened. The food was good. That was irrelevant. Frost set down his own fork, reached across the table, picked up my hand and placed it flat on the tabletop beneath his, palm over knuckles, warm and deliberate and completely immovable. He didn't look at Knox once. Knox's jaw tightened. His fork hit his plate. I was vibrating. "This is incredible," I said, slightly breathless. "The push and pull between you two. This is exactly the kind of charged dynamic my readers lose their minds over. You're both so perfectly opposite. Knox, you lead with instinct. Frost, you lead with strategy. And that collision is—" "Levi," Frost said quietly. "The foundation of every great love story. Levi," Knox this time. "I'm just saying you two would make the most devastating couple." Neither of them said another word. They just looked at me. Frost's hand stayed over mine on the table. Knox's dark eyes hadn't moved from my face in 4 minutes. And something about being looked at by both of them, at exactly the same time, with exactly that quality of attention, made my sentence dissolve before it finished. I cleared my throat. "I'll get dessert," I said. I stood. Knox stood at the same moment, stepped directly into my path, and placed both hands on my shoulders. Walked me backward 3 slow steps until my back met the wall. He leaned in close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his chest, his chain swinging forward, his dark eyes level with mine, and said one sentence low enough that only I could hear it. I stopped breathing. Then Frost appeared in the doorway behind Knox, and I saw it. 1 degree of shift in that glacial face, something tightening around his eyes, something that in any romance I had ever written would be labeled without hesitation as jealousy. My writer brain ignited. This was it. This was the catalyst. The emotional turning point I had been engineering all week was happening right now against this wall, with Knox's hands on my shoulders and Frost watching from the doorway, and everything was going exactly according to plan. I made a mental note to write this scene the moment I got to my laptop. I was smiling on the inside. I did not notice that Frost had not looked at Knox once since appearing in that doorway. I did not notice that his eyes had come directly to me and had not moved from my face since. I did not notice any of that at all. I was too busy being convinced I was the director of this story to realize I had just become the plot. That night I don't sleep. I lie in the dark between 2 alphas, staring at the ceiling with Knox's words sitting in my chest like something I swallowed wrong, and Frost's 2-second grip on my wrist, still warm against my pulse point, and I do what any reasonable person would do in this situation. I open my notes app under the covers and start writing character observations. By 3 in the morning, I have 4 pages. By 4, I close the app, because Shipwatcher07 has sent a notification on my serial that I made the mistake of reading. I put my phone face down on the mattress. I stared at the ceiling. Knox shifted in his sleep, and the sound of it, just that, just the small, ordinary sound of him moving, made something in my chest pull sideways in a direction I had no name for and absolutely no interest in naming. I closed my eyes and told myself it was stress. The next morning, everything felt different, and I couldn't explain why. My skin was running warm. The room smelled fuller than usual, closer, richer, like the air had gained weight overnight. The morning light coming through the curtains felt sharper than it had any business being, and I sat up in bed blinking and ran a full internal diagnostic and landed on the only reasonable conclusion available to me. Stress, poor sleep, residual creative excitement from last night's material. I reached for my laptop. "You've been staring at that screen for 4 minutes without typing," Knox said from across the room. "I'm thinking," I said. "You were thinking all night," he said. I could hear it. Alphas cannot literally hear thinking, Knox. "No," he said, pulling his shirt over his head. A different shirt, unfortunately, which meant today was going to be marginally less distracting than yesterday. But they can hear someone turning over in bed 47 times. It was not 47. It was at least 47. Frost set a plate in front of me without a word. 1 plate. My chair pulled out, waiting. I sat, and he rested both hands on the back of the chair for a half-second before stepping away, and his breath touched the back of my neck in that narrow window, and I picked up my fork and stared at my eggs with the focused energy of a man actively not reacting to anything. "Thank you," I said. "Eat?" he said. Knox dropped into the chair across from me, And the moment Frost's hand passed across my shoulder on his way to the counter, Knox's jaw set, and the temperature in the room shifted, and I put my fork down because I recognized this energy, and I needed to manage it before it derailed my entire operation. "Knox," I said, "can I talk to you for a second?" "Talk," he said. "Alone." Frost walked out with his coffee cup, like he had been expecting this. I waited until the bedroom door was mostly closed, then turned to Knox with my most reasonable expression, carefully assembled. "I need you to not do that," I said. "Do what?" he said. "The jaw thing, the temperature thing. Every time Frost gets near me, you go completely territorial, and I need you to understand that there is nothing going on between me and Frost that should make you feel—" "Feel what?" Knox said. He leaned forward on the table, and the chain around his neck swung forward, and his dark eyes were very steady and very close, and I suddenly became aware that this conversation was not going the direction I had steered it. "Jealous," I said. "You shouldn't feel threatened." "Levi." His hand came up slowly and his thumb traced along my jaw, one slow, deliberate line from my chin to my ear, while I was still mid-sentence and my voice simply stopped producing sound. "Do I look threatened to you?" I had no answer for that. He leaned back, picked up his coffee, said nothing else. I found Frost in the bedroom and closed the door behind me and took a breath and delivered the same speech with what I felt was considerably more composure. "I need you to understand," I said, "that Knox doesn't mean anything by the physical stuff. It's just his personality. You don't need to feel—" "Feel what?" Frost said. He was sitting on his bed with his book open, and he looked up at me with that flat winter attention that made every word I'd prepared feel slightly inadequate. "Competitive," I said, "or jealous, or whatever it is that makes you—" He reached out and tucked a strand of red hair behind my ear with 2 fingers, slowly, like he had all the time in the world and had decided to spend some of it specifically there. "I'm not jealous, Levi," he said. His fingers stayed at my temple a moment longer than necessary. "Should I be?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. "Go eat your breakfast," he said, and looked back at his book. I walked back to the kitchen and sat down and picked up my fork and put it down again, because something was happening in the room that I could not scientifically account for. Knox kept rolling his window open. Frost had stopped in the middle of making his bed and was just standing there with a pillowcase in his hands, going absolutely nowhere. The air felt thick and warm and present in a way that had no logical explanation. Knox sat beside me on the couch and didn't leave any space between us. He picked up my hand and turned it over and traced the lines on my palm with 1 finger, slowly, like he was reading something written there, and I stared at my own hand and forgot what language felt like. "Knox," I said finally. He said, not stopping. "What are you doing?" "Nothing," he said. "This is not nothing. It's just your hand, Levi." It was not just my hand. My hand was connected to my arm, which was connected to my entire body, which was currently staging a full revolt against every rational position I had ever held, and I needed it to stop immediately. Frost crossed the room, crouched in front of me, and looked up. On anyone else, that position would read as gentle. On Frost, it read as a wolf deciding to sit before it moved. He rested his chin on my knee and just looked at me from below with those winter-gray eyes and said nothing at all, and the nothing was somehow the loudest thing in the room. Something cracked open in the air around me. I felt it before I understood it. A warmth that wasn't temperature, a pull that wasn't gravity, moving outward from my skin in every direction like a tide going out. Knox went very still beside me. Frost's eyes darkened by 1 full shade. They looked at each other over my head, and something passed between them that I was not fast enough or honest enough to read correctly. "I need the bathroom," I said. I ran cold water over both wrists and stared at myself in the mirror, and the face staring back was flushed and bright-eyed and completely failing to look like someone who had everything under control. "You are the author," I told my reflection. "You are never the main character. You are collecting material. This is all material." My reflection looked deeply unconvinced. I opened the door. Knox and Frost were both standing in the hallway, not fighting, not competing, just standing there waiting for me with the coordinated patience of two people who had silently agreed on exactly one thing. I walked back to the couch, and they sat down on either side of me simultaneously, like it had been rehearsed, and the warmth of them pressed in from both sides, and the room smelled overwhelmingly like something I still refused to identify. Knox spoke first. "You know," he said casually, like he was commenting on the weather, "I've never wanted to stay in one place as much as I've wanted to stay in this dorm." I blinked. That's nice. The rent is reasonable." "It's not the rent," Knox said. Frost's voice came quietly from my other side, precise and unhurried, aimed like something with a target. "I've read and written more in the last 3 weeks than I have in the last 3 years, he said. "I keep thinking it's the environment." A pause. "It isn't the environment." I sat between them, and the words landed one after the other, like two stones dropped into still water, and the ripples met in the middle directly where I was sitting, and something in my chest cracked open slowly and completely, and I heard, really heard, for the first time, what neither of them was saying about each other. They were not talking about each other. They had never been talking about each other, my cereal, my ship, my perfect enemies to lovers slow burn, that I had been engineering and writing and publishing chapter by chapter for weeks. I turned and looked at Knox. Then I turned and looked at Frost, and the smile I had been wearing since the day I moved in slipped off my face completely. I stand up so fast the cushion bounces. "I need water," I say. I don't go to the kitchen. I walk straight to the bathroom, close the door, turn the lock, and stand over the sink, gripping the edges, with both hands, while the mirror shows me a face I don't fully recognize. Flushed, bright-eyed, the face of a man whose entire manuscript just turned around and looked back at him. I turn the cold tap on and put both wrists under it and breathe. They never liked each other. The person they liked was always him. I replay it 3 times looking for the angle I missed, the narrative trick, the place where I misread the scene. Because I don't misread scenes. I am a professional. I have written 47 chapters of romantic tension across 6 different stories, and I have never once misidentified a ship. I am not the kind of person who mistakes the direction of a feeling. I am the kind of person who names feelings before the people having them even know they exist, except apparently not when the feelings are aimed at me. The knock came from Knox first, 3 solid raps, Levi. Then Frost, quieter, right after. "Are you all right?" I stared at the door. 2 alphas standing in a hallway outside a bathroom asking if I was okay, and meaning it, and the sheer domesticity of that image made everything I was already feeling significantly worse. I unlocked the door. They were both there. Knox with his shoulder against the doorframe, arms crossed, chain swinging, dark eyes tracking my face the second it appeared. Frost standing precisely 1 step behind him, silver hair, white shirt, hands loose at his sides, watching me with that winter attention that never missed anything. I crossed my arms. "I have a question," I said. "Okay," Knox said. "Did you two not like each other?" I said. "Because I want you to understand that everything I saw, every single moment in this dorm for the past 3 weeks, pointed to 2 people circling something unspoken. The tension, the arguments. The way you looked at each other across every room. I am not an amateur. I know what unresolved feelings look like, and what I saw between you two looked exactly—" "Levi," Frost said, "like a slow burn enemies to lovers arc that was 3 chapters away from—" "Levi," Knox said. "What?" I said. They looked at each other, then back at me, and they said it at almost exactly the same time, Knox half a second ahead of Frost, their voices overlapping at the edges like they had rehearsed it without knowing. "I never liked him. I never liked him." I stared. "The person I liked," Knox said, "was always you." "The person I liked," Frost said, quieter, more precise, landing each word like it had been measured, "was always you." The hallway was very small suddenly. I became aware of the specific distance between my body and theirs, and how little of it there was. "Okay," I said. "Okay, but—" I held up one finger. "The hallway. 3 weeks ago. I locked you both out, and I watched through the peephole, and Knox had you against the wall, Frost, and there was heat, there was intensity. It did not look like two people who had no feelings for each other. "We were arguing," Knox said. "About what?" I said. Knox looked at Frost. Frost looked at Knox. "About you," Frost said. "Knox had gotten too close to you that morning," Frost said. "I told him to back off. And I told him," Knox said, "that he didn't get to make that call." "So the wall," I said, "was me telling him," Frost said evenly, "that if he couldn't control himself around you, I was going to be a problem. And I was telling him," Knox said, "that he could try." I stood in the hallway between them and did the math on every single moment I had witnessed, every scene I had written, every chapter I had posted, and the math kept coming out the same wrong answer, and the wrong answer was me, and I pressed both hands flat against my face and said, muffled and slightly broken, "I am so embarrassed." "Levi," Knox started. "I need space," I said into my hands. "I need everyone to give me space to think, please." They gave me space. I heard them move back down the hallway, and I closed the bathroom door again and sat down on the floor with my back against the tub and thought about it properly for the first time. Every time my skin ran warm, every time my pulse made poor decisions, every time the room smelled different and fuller and closer, and I blamed the candles or the stress or the poor sleep. My body had been trying to tell me something for weeks, in a language I had been too busy writing everyone else's story to read. I liked Knox. I had liked Knox since the morning he ate my cereal without apology and dragged me into a headlock and made it feel like the most natural thing in the world. I liked Frost. I had liked Frost since he moved my lamp without being asked and tucked my hair back with 2 fingers and looked at me like I was a sentence he was still deciding how to finish. I liked them both, which meant I had a problem with no clean resolution because I wrote endings for a living and I could not see one here. If I chose Knox, Frost would go cold in a way that had nothing to do with his personality. If I chose Frost, Knox would burn the whole dorm down. There was no version of this story where everyone walked away whole, and I was the one who had built the situation from the ground up, with my own 2 hands and my own catastrophic confidence. I got into bed when the dorm had gone quiet, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and stared at the ceiling and let the impossibility of it settle over me like a second blanket. The door opened 20 minutes later. Frost came in first. He sat on the edge of my bed, reached under the blanket, found my hand and held it with both of his. Calm and certain, the way he did everything, like he had decided and the decision was final, and there was no version of events in which he let go. "You don't have to figure it out tonight," he said quietly. "I know," I said. "But I'm not going anywhere," he said. "I know," I said again, softer. Then the blanket lifted from behind me, and a large warm body pressed against my back, and a tattooed arm came over my waist, and Knox's voice appeared very close to the back of my neck. "You're cold," he said. "I'm just providing warmth. This is not a thing." "Knox," I said, "go to sleep." "Knox, you're in my bed. Our body temperatures are compatible. It's science. That is not—" The arm around my waist disappeared so fast I felt the cold of it. Knox left the bed the way a person leaves a bed when they have been physically removed from it, which is to say he didn't leave it, he was taken from it. Frost's hand twisted in his collar, dragging him backward, with a force that had nothing calm or precise about it. And Knox hit the floor with a crash that shook the desk lamp, and suddenly both of them were standing in the narrow space between the beds, and the temperature in the room went from warm to incendiary in under 2 seconds. "Don't," Frost said. One word. But the way he said it. "You don't own this bed," Knox said, getting up from the floor with his chain swinging, and his jaw set, and his eyes carrying something that had moved well past competitive into something older and rawer, and considerably more dangerous. "Neither do you," Frost said. I was keeping him warm. "You were staking a claim. Same thing." I sat up in my bed and pulled my blanket to my chest, and watched 2 alphas face off in my bedroom over me, and felt, for the first time since this story began, completely and utterly unable to write my way out of what happened next. "I like you both." The words leave my mouth before I can architect them into something more controlled, and they land in the middle of the room like a dropped match, and everything stops. Knox and Frost are still chest to chest, in the narrow space between the beds. The fight had been escalating, voices low and dangerous, Knox's chain swinging, Frost's collar twisted in Knox's fist, and now it is simply gone, replaced by a silence so complete I can hear the candle on the desk guttering in its own wax. They both turn and look at me. The shock on their faces is identical for exactly 1 second. Then they look at each other, and the shock hardens into something considerably more complicated. The math is sitting between them plain and unavoidable. Equal standing. Neither of them likes it. Neither of them can argue with it. Both, Knox said. Both, I confirmed. Him, Knox said, pointing at Frost. And you, I said, pointing at Knox. Yes, both. I am aware of how this sounds. Frost looked at Knox. Knox looked at Frost. The look they exchanged was the most communicative thing I had ever witnessed two people do, without opening their mouths, and whatever they said to each other in that silence was going to fuel my writing for the next 6 months minimum. Except I was not thinking about my writing right now, because I was too busy sitting on my bed, having just confessed to 2 alphas simultaneously, and waiting to see if the room survived it. I don't want you fighting, I said. I will figure out a solution, but right now I need everyone to go to sleep. Knox opened his mouth. Sleep, Knox. He closed it. Frost straightened his collar, said nothing, moved to his bed with that precise economy of motion that meant he was feeling considerably more than he was showing. Knox dropped onto his own bed and stared at the ceiling with his arm over his face, and his chain pulled against his collarbone, and the room settled into a quiet that had absolutely nothing restful about it. I lay back and pulled my blanket up and stared at the ceiling, and felt both of them watching me through the dark. Nobody slept. I could feel their eyes. Not metaphorically, physically. 2 sets of alpha attention pressing against my skin from opposite sides of the room, like hands that weren't touching me, and I lay completely still and told myself to breathe normally, and my body responded by breathing in exactly the opposite of normally. It started small. A warmth low in my chest that had nothing to do with the blanket. A pull that moved outward from my sternum in slow, expanding waves. My skin prickled. My breathing went shallow without my permission. I pressed my face into my pillow and told myself firmly and specifically to stop. My body did not stop. It got worse. The room smelled overwhelmingly like both of them. Knox's warmth and Frost's cold cutting through the dark from opposite directions. And my omega instincts were catching every frequency of it and responding with the complete absence of shame or self-regulation. I was mortified. I was overheating. I was about 30 seconds from making a sound I would never recover from. Then the mattress dipped. Frost sat beside me and pressed one hand to my forehead and went completely still. Levi, he said quietly, you're burning. I'm fine, I said into the pillow. You're not fine. He didn't ask permission. He pulled me up and against his chest, one arm around my back, his other hand pressing my face into the curve of his neck, and the cold of his skin against my burning face was so immediate and so overwhelming that I grabbed his shirt in both fists and held on. Knox sat up across the room, didn't move, watched. Frost held me against him, and I could feel my temperature beginning to respond, the cold of him pulling the heat out of me degree by degree. And for approximately 40 seconds I thought it was working. Then his scent hit me properly, up close, full strength. And whatever control I had been holding on to dissolved completely. I turned my face up. Frost looked down at me for one long moment, with those winter gray eyes gone several shades darker than usual. I kissed him. He went still for 1 full second. 1 single second of composure making its last stand, and then he kissed me back. His hands moved into my red hair, fingers spreading slowly, tilting my head back, and his lips were soft and unhurried and repeated. Not one kiss, but many, each one landing and lifting and finding me again, my mouth, the corner of my lips, back to the center, slow and consuming, and building into something that had no interest in stopping. I made a sound against his mouth. His hands tightened in my hair. We sank back into the bed together, and the blanket came with us, and Frost's cold hands slid beneath the hem of my shirt and pressed flat against the burning skin of my waist, and I arched into the contact and pulled him closer by his shirt, because the cold felt like relief, and the relief felt like wanting, and the wanting felt like everything I had been writing about for years, landing on my own skin for the first time. His lips left my mouth and dragged slowly down my throat, pressed there, stayed there. His palms spread flat across my lower back, pulling our bodies flush, and my fingers threaded through his silver hair and held on while his mouth traced the curve of my collarbone, my jaw, finding its way back to my lips again and again, like it already knew the route. His breathing had changed. His hands were moving across my skin like they had forgotten how to be still, up my back, across my ribs, along my jaw. And Frost, always composed, always the coldest thing in every room, was coming completely undone against my mouth and taking me with him. Knox stood at the side of the bed. He didn't move. He watched Frost's hands move under my shirt. He watched my face tipped back against the pillow. He watched every soft kiss land and lift and land again, and he stood completely still with his hand gripped around the bedpost, and his jaw set, and his eyes carrying something raw and unguarded that he had no performance left to cover. He stayed exactly where he was, because I needed this, because this was helping, because sometimes doing the right thing feels like standing outside in the cold watching warmth through a window, and Knox was going to be absolutely fine about it. He was not fine about it. Frost pulled back, not easily. His hands stilled first. Then his mouth lifted from mine slowly, like something being peeled apart. He held my face in both his hands and looked at me, chest rising and falling, silver hair fallen across his forehead, eyes darker than I had ever seen them, and said quietly, steadily, like a man who had just pulled himself back from a very significant edge, "You're calm now." I blinked. The heat had broken. My skin was no longer burning. My breathing was evening out. The pull in my chest had quieted into something warm and manageable and exhausted. "Frost," I said. His name came out soft and unfinished. "Sleep," he said. He tucked the blanket around me, smoothed my red hair back from my face with one hand, and I watched his expression do something quiet and unguarded in the dark that he probably didn't know I could see. My eyes were already closing. The last thing I was aware of before sleep took me was Knox's voice, low and rough, coming from somewhere across the room. He said one word, just one, not to Frost, not to me, just to the dark, like a man making a promise to himself. I didn't catch it. I was already gone. I wake up red, not gradually, not slowly. My eyes open, and the memory of last night descends on me all at once. Frost's hands under my shirt, his mouth on my throat, the repeated soft press of his lips finding mine again and again in the dark. And my face floods with heat so fast, I yank the blanket over my head and lie there in the dark of it, making absolutely no sound. I am a professional writer of romantic fiction. I have written this scene countless times. I was not prepared for it to happen to me on an actual bed with an actual person who smelled like winter and held my face like it was something worth being careful with. I heard movement, 2 sets of it, quiet and coordinated. The blanket was not going to save me. Knox set the tray on the bedside table. I heard the ceramic, the cutlery, the specific sound of someone trying to be quieter than they naturally were. Then Frost arranged everything with his usual precision. Small adjustments. The cup handle turned to the right angle, the plate positioned exactly so. And I lowered the blanket 1 inch and looked at them both standing in the small space beside Frost's bed doing this for me. And my instincts responded immediately and without any shame whatsoever. "I can get up," I said. "You're staying in bed," Knox said. "I'm completely fine. You were running a temperature last night," Frost said. "Eat. I feel normal." "You don't look normal," Knox said. "You look like a tomato." "That's just my complexion." "Levi." "I'm getting up," I said, and moved toward the edge of the bed, and Knox's hand wrapped around my ankle and pulled me back with the calm certainty of a man who had decided this was not a negotiation. And Frost set another thing on the tray, and I lay back against the pillow and stared at the ceiling and accepted that I was not getting up. They stayed close. That was the problem. They moved around the small space, bringing things, adjusting things, finding reasons to be within arm's reach. And the warmth of having 2 people care for me, with that quality of focused attention, was doing nothing good for the thing I was trying to keep quiet in my chest. My instincts were awake and fully operational, and interested in absolutely everything happening in this room, and I needed them to stop. Frost checked his watch. "I have to step out," he said. 1 hour. He picked up his bag, paused at the door and looked back at me with that flat winter gaze that said 12 things without opening his mouth. Then he left, and the door clicked shut behind him, and the room lost one layer of its intensity, and I exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. "Right," I said. "I'm getting up." Knox said nothing this time. I made it to the kitchen and found him at the sink finishing the breakfast things, and I moved to the counter beside him and reached for the dish towel because I was a functioning adult who helped with dishes. "Go back to bed," he said. "I've been in bed for 12 hours. You were running a—" "Knox." I picked up a dish. "I'm helping." He let me help. We stood side by side at the counter, and the silence between us was not the comfortable kind. It was the kind that had weight and temperature and history, and I was very focused on the dish I was drying, and he was very focused on the one he was washing, and neither of us was saying the thing that was sitting in the middle of the kitchen taking up all the air. Knox stopped washing. I kept drying. He turned to face me, and I felt it before I saw it. The shift in his energy, the way the room pressure changed when Knox made a decision. And I put the dish down and looked at him. His dark eyes were direct and unguarded in a way that had nowhere to hide. "That image," he said. "Last night, you in Frost's arms." He stopped, started again. "It's been replaying in my head since the second it happened." His jaw worked once. "I wanted to be the one with my hands on you. I wanted you like that." He said it plainly. No performance, no deflection. Just Knox, standing in the kitchen in the morning light, with his chain against his chest, and every card face up on the table. "I've wanted it since before I knew what to call it." The back of my neck went warm. I looked at him, the tattoos climbing his throat, the dark, steady eyes, all that barely leashed intensity pointed directly and only at me. And I thought about Frost's mouth, soft and repeated and consuming, and I wondered what this would feel like. Whether it would be as fierce as everything else about him. Whether a kiss from Knox felt like the man himself, immediate, overwhelming, no warning. "I want to find out," I said. Knox moved. His hands came to either side of my face, and his mouth found mine, and I found out immediately that I was right. It was nothing like Frost. Where Frost was soft and repeated and building, Knox was consuming from the first second. His lips urgent and certain, his hands moving from my face into my hair, tilting my head back, kissing me like he had been holding this in for weeks and was done holding anything. He lifted me onto the counter without breaking the kiss, and I grabbed his shoulders, and he stepped into the space between my knees and kissed me fiercer, and I kissed him back with everything I had, because my instincts had been waiting for this specific heat, and they were not interested in being reasonable about it. His mouth left mine and dragged down my throat, slower now, deliberate, learning the geography of it, and I tipped my head back against the cabinet, and his hands moved across my skin, pulling my shirt up and off, and his lips followed the trail his hands made down my chest, my stomach, each place they landed, making my breath come shorter, and my fingers curl tighter in his black hair. Lower. His mouth kept moving, and I stopped being able to track individual thoughts. There was only the heat of his hands on my waist, holding me steady, and his mouth taking me apart piece by piece, and the sounds leaving my throat had nothing composed or controlled left in them. My back arched off the cabinet. My fingers gripped his hair. The warmth building in my lower body was electric and consuming, and I was so far gone I didn't hear the door. I heard Frost. Not a word, not a sound, just the specific quality of a silence that had a person in it. I opened my eyes. Frost stood in the kitchen doorway, still, his bag over one shoulder, his eyes moving across the scene, me on the counter, flushed and undone, and barely anything covering me, Knox's hands on my waist, the heat of the room telling the whole story, without a single word needing to be said. His eyes found mine, and the look in them was not anger, it was not surprise, it was desire, pure and undisguised, and so direct it felt like a physical thing, aimed across the kitchen and landing on my skin like a second pair of hands. Nobody moved. Nobody reached for the door. The three of us stayed exactly where we were, and the kitchen held its breath, and I sat on the counter between a man who had just taken me apart and a man in the doorway who looked like he had every intention of finishing what Knox started. Frost sets his bag down, slowly, Like he has all the time in the world and has decided to spend it specifically here. His eyes move across the kitchen, Knox's hands on my waist, my position on the counter, the heat of the room telling the complete story, and something in his face shifts into an expression I have never seen on him before. Not anger, not jealousy, something considerably more dangerous than either. He reaches for the hem of his shirt, pulls it off. Then the suspenders, unclipped from his trousers one side at a time, deliberately, without hurry, his eyes on me the entire time. Then the collar chain, set on the counter beside the door with a soft metallic sound. This was Frost deciding that if something was happening in this kitchen, then he was going to be part of it on his own terms and at his own pace, and there was nothing any of us could do about it. I was on the counter getting hit from every direction simultaneously, and my Omega instincts had stopped taking requests. "Frost," I said. My voice came out considerably smaller than intended. He said nothing, just looked at me with those winter gray eyes gone several shades darker, and let the looking be the answer. Knox's mouth was at my ear from behind. "Still thinking about your cereal?" he said quietly. "I haven't thought about my cereal in 4 hours," I said honestly. "Good." His hands tightened at my waist, and he turned me slowly, his chest pressing against my back, one hand spread flat against my stomach, his chin dropping to my shoulder, and he said something low enough that only I could hear it, and my knees stopped working entirely, and I gripped the counter edge with both hands to compensate. Frost crossed the kitchen. He stopped in front of me and looked at me from close range, close enough that I could feel the cold coming off his bare skin, close enough that I could see the specific darkness in his eyes that meant Frost had made a decision, and the decision was final. And he reached out and pushed the red hair back from my face with both hands and held it there, and just looked at me for one long moment, like he was reading the last page of something he had been waiting to finish. Then his eyes moved to Knox over my shoulder. Knox went still behind me. Something passed between them. Wordless, complete. The kind of communication that didn't need language because the language would have taken too long. Knox read it in under 2 seconds. His hands shifted. His energy changed. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. This wasn't the right place. They moved me to the bedroom with a tenderness that was somehow more intimate than everything that had come before it. Knox's arm around my back, Frost's hand at my shoulder, both of them careful and certain and unhurried, and I was boneless between them and warm all the way through, and completely incapable of forming an objection even if I had wanted one. Frost lay down on the bed first. He reached up and pulled me down onto his chest, my warmth against his cold, his arms coming around my back, his bare skin against mine, and the contrast was so immediate and so overwhelming that I pressed my face into his neck and held on. His hand moved slowly up my spine. Knox settled behind me. His warmth pressed in from the other side, chest against my back, one arm coming over my waist, his mouth finding the back of my neck, and I was between them and the feeling of being held from both directions simultaneously, with that specific quality of wanting pressing in from every side, was something I had written about 11 times across 6 stories, and had never once actually felt. It felt nothing like I had written it. It was better, warmer, more real, more terrifying. Hands moved, lips found skin, Frost's mouth at my temple, my jaw, finding my lips and kissing me with that slow, repeated tenderness that undid me completely every time. Knox's lips at the back of my neck, my shoulder, his hands moving across my skin with a reverence that had nothing of his usual fierceness in it and everything of what lived underneath the fierceness when he let it out. I was dizzy and lost between cold and warmth, between 2 completely different kinds of wanting pressing in from both sides, and the room was climbing in temperature, and all 3 of us were heading somewhere, and none of us was pulling back. Frost's hand moved through my hair. Knox pressed closer from behind. I turned my face and found Knox's mouth and kissed him, and felt him smile against my lips for exactly 1 second before the smile disappeared into something more serious and more consuming, and I reached back and pulled him closer, and Frost's hands tightened at my waist, and the 3 of us were moving together, like something that had been building for weeks, and had finally found its direction, and there was nothing in this room that was going to stop it. 3 knocks hit the front door, sharp, cheerful, completely unbothered by what they had just interrupted. All three of us went absolutely still. The silence in the bedroom was the loudest silence I had ever sat inside. Then, "Levi, it's Danny. I have your textbook. I texted you like 6 times. Oh my God, are you alive in there?" Nobody moved for 3 full seconds. Then Knox said, very quietly, one word that I will not repeat. "Get dressed," Frost said. He was already sitting up, already reaching for his shirt, buttoning it from the bottom with a steadiness of hand that I found genuinely offensive given the circumstances. I fell off the bed, not gracefully, not intentionally. I simply attempted to stand, and my legs filed a formal complaint, and the floor happened. Knox pulled me upright by my arm without comment and handed me my shirt, and I pulled it over my head inside out, and he turned me around and fixed it with the quick efficiency of a man who had decided that dignity was a secondary concern to speed. "Your hair," Frost said. I ran both hands through my red hair. It did not help. It made it worse. "Levi, I can hear you moving around in there. I know you're home." Danny's voice came through the door, bright and merciless, and completely innocent of everything she had just interrupted. Knox straightened his chain. Frost smoothed his silver hair back into place with one hand like he hadn't just been, like the last 20 minutes had simply not occurred. I looked at both of them. Knox shirtless because his shirt was somewhere in the kitchen and there was no time. Frost buttoned but rumpled in a way Frost was never rumpled. I opened the door. Danny stood in the hallway with my textbook under one arm and a smile that lasted exactly 2 seconds. Her eyes went past me, moved to Knox, standing behind me with no shirt, and his tattoos and his chain and his expression. Then to Frost behind him, silver hair, rumpled white shirt, the particular quality of stillness he had when he was feeling the most. Her mouth opened, stayed open. The textbook slipped from under her arm and hit the floor, and she didn't look down at it. "Levi," she said very slowly, "what exactly have you been doing in there?" "Studying," I said. "Studying," she repeated. "Character research," I said. "For the serial." She looked at me, at my inside-out collar, at my red hair that no amount of hand-running had saved, at the general condition of my face which I could feel was still 3 shades past its normal color. Then her eyes went back to Knox and Frost, standing in my doorway, and her expression moved through 6 different emotions without settling on any of them. Her mouth was still open. Nothing came out. The end. Levi spent 3 weeks writing the love story of 2 men who were never in love with each other. He engineered every moment, built every scene, published every chapter, and missed every single sign that was aimed directly at him. The lamp frost moved without being asked. The headlock over cereal that had nothing to do with cereal. The candlelit dinner where nobody looked at anybody except him. He was so busy being the author, he never noticed he was the plot. If you were screaming at your screen the entire time, drop a comment telling us the one moment you wanted to reach through the screen and shake him. We all have one. If this story wrecked you even a little, like and share it, because someone out there needs to watch Levi suffer too.